those awkward and difficult topics, but inshallah, as usual, will be a benefit, inshallah ta'ala. As you're all aware, the situation in Syria is becoming quite difficult right now, and our du'as are for the people of Syria. My job here today is not to be a political analyst, but to teach you some facts that you should know about that region, and in particular, the reality of the sectarian differences that are taking place. So today, inshallah ta'ala, I want to introduce to you one of the most fringe, bizarre movements of our faith, and it is of practical relevance because this movement is in charge of the land of Syria. And I mean here the group that is known as the Nusayris or the Alawites. Now my goal today is not to fuel the fan of sectarianism. I have always been a vocal critic of sectarianism, and I remain a critic of violence. We should not be hurting one another even if we have different interpretations of Islam. But we cannot change the fact that there are many sectarian elements taking place in that land. So today's information is really for just knowledge purposes. As for actual, sectarian warfare going on, I have always been opposed to this. But the fact of the matter is, when you bring in sectarian politics and when you have people being killed, it is understandable they're going to stand up and defend themselves, right? So with this disclaimer, today's topic is going to be about who is this group? What is this group that call themselves the Alawites, the Nusayris? We begin with a brief introduction. We're talking about one of the strands of Shi'i Islam. Now, Shi'ism is a very complex and very nuanced spectrum. It begins from something very close to Sunnism and it works its way all the way out to the fringe. And the movement that is closest to Sunnism is, for example, Zaydism. This is the very closest movement. And Zaydis are in Yemen, and Zaydis are in that awkward spectrum where the Shia consider them Sunni and the Sunni consider them Shia. I'm not joking. Zaydis are smack in the middle. The Sunnis consider them to be the beginning of Shi'ism. And the other Shia say, no, you're the end of Sunnism. So they're in that middle. We'll talk about Zaydism maybe another day. The next movement after Zaydism is the famous largest group of Shi'ism called Twelver or Imami Shia. And these are the ones that believe in 12 Imams. These are the ones that are predominant in Iran and other places. And this is the largest demographics of Shi'i Islam. Zaydis are very small, less than 5-10% of Shi'ism. Twelver Shi'ism is probably 80% of Shi'ism. You move on one more, and then you get Ismailism. And Ismailism is probably another 7-8% of Shi'ism. So Ismailism is another strand called Seveners, and for the Indian Pakistanis, you know them as the Bohra or the Aga Khanis, Nizaris. For the Arabs, there's a Duruz strand, very, very small strand. All of this is Ismailism. Then you move to the other. Now we're talking about the most fringe. That's our topic for today. And this movement actually goes back to an ancient movement called the Ghulat movement. The Ghulat are literally extremists. Now, I'm not using this term. The term Ghulat is used by both Sunni scholars and Twelver Shi'i scholars. This is the key point here. The term Ghulat al-Shia is not something I am inventing in this year. The term Ghulat al-Shia goes back to the first books ever written about Islamic theology from both Sunnis and from Shia, Twelver Shia, Imami Shia. The Imami Shias, for example, one of their great scholars, An-Nawbakhti, and also Al-Qummi and others, they have Firaq al-Shia, they have an entire book about Tashayyur. And they have a category called Ghulat, the extremists. They call this group the Ghulat. This isn't coming from me. We also call them the Ghulat. What is the main distinction between the Imamis and the Ghulat? The Imamis, the Twelvers, and for the record, I have said this very clearly, I don't agree with their theology, but I also don't agree with the notion that we all consider them to be kuffar. No, they are Muslims with creeds that we believe are heretic or deviant, bid'ah we call them, right? But they are within the fold of Islam as a default. And I am public about this and I will defend this. If anybody wants, we can talk about this. As a default, we're not talking about specifics if they have a bizarre ideology, a particular person. As a default, Imamis, Twelvers are within Islam, and I have always been against any type of violence or sectarianism between our two strands. The Imamis consider this strand to be ghulat. What is the distinction? Imamis say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted Ali radiallahu anh to be the Khalifa after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his descendants. This is their belief. The Ghulat go more than this. The Ghulat say that aspects of divinity are in the Imams. This is the distinction between the Imamis and the Ghulats. The Imamis do not claim divinity at all. They do not say that our Imams are manifestations of God. They don't say this. As for the Ghulat, which is the most extreme sect or strand of Shi'ism, from the beginning, and this goes back all the way to the first century of the Hijrah, there was a movement within Iraq, within Kufa, called the Kaysanis, and the Kaysanis are the first movement of the Ghulat. And they literally said that Ali radiallahu anh is a manifestation of God on earth. And the Imamis themselves said, no, we're not going there. We don't agree with you. That is called the Ghulat. Now, make a long story short, the only Ghulat sect that remains in our times is the sect we're talking about today, and that is the Nusayris. What is the main characteristic of the Ghulat sect? Number one, we'll mention three things. Number one, all of the Ghulat sects, they claim that the Imams have aspects of divinity, or they are manifesting Allah on earth, or they are Allah on earth. One of these things. All of the Ghulat sects. There's something of divinity in the Imams. Number two, they say that the ruh of the human does not go back to Allah and become resurrected. There is no heaven and hell. Rather, the ruh transfers to another body like the Hindus believe, like the Buddhists believe. This is called tanasukh al-arwah. It is called the transmigration of the soul. So the Ghulat movements do not believe in Qiyamah. They do not believe in Jannah and Nar. They think if you're good, the ruh goes to a higher body, and if you're bad, it'll go to a lower body. And if you're really good, eventually, it will free itself from this world and reunite with Allah, which is essentially straight out of Hinduism and the Far Eastern religions. And by the way, the Ghulat movements, including the Nusayris, the Ghulat movements, they are combinations of Islam and non-Muslim religions. For example, Christianity, we'll see that today, Gnosticism, Manichaeism, Zoroastrianism. You have aspects of other faith traditions in the Ghulat movement. So number two, they don't believe in heaven and hell. They believe in ruh going from body to body. And number three, none of the Ghulat movements follow the physical laws of the Sharia. They interpret the Sharia to be in a mystical manner. There is no salah, there is no zakah, there is no siyam, there is no hajj, there is no tilawat al-Quran, there is no ibadah that we recognize. So the Ghulat do not have any aspects of our ibadah. Now, as I said, the Ghulat were many movements. In our times, the main movement that remains from that is the Nusayris. It is the Alawis. Now, firstly, a terminology. Nusayri or Alawi. For 1,360 or 50 years, they were only called the Nusayris. That was the movement's name. There was no other name. In 1920, one of their intellectual leaders, a pan-Arab socialist nationalist, a very famous person, Ghalib al-Tawil, he wanted to bring the Nusayri movement closer to mainstream Islam, at least sociologically, not theologically. He wanted to make other Muslims consider his strand to be similar to Islam. So he started calling his own movement Alawi. We are followers of Ali. We have things to do with Ali. We are Alawi. We are people of Ali. So the term Alawi only goes back 100 years, literally 1920. Before this time, the term Alawi did not exist. And the movement adopted the term Alawi so that the notion is they are Alawi, followers of Ali. There's an Alawi association with us, right? There's a Sufi tariqah called the Ba'alawi order, which is a mainstream Sunni tariqah, Sufi tariqah. So the Alawi is a term that is common in Muslim circular. So they adopted it. Why? To make this notion that we are similar to everybody else. So we actually use the term Nusayri because that's the classical term. Where did the term Nusayri come from? And how many are they? The Nusayris are probably around 1.7 million, 1.6 million. And the majority of them are in Syria, a smaller amount in Turkey and in Lebanon. But the majority of them are not only in Syria, but in one province of Sham of Syria, which is the coastal region of Latakia. This is the coastal region of Syria. And that region is 70% Alawi. That is a concentration in that one small, province. This is where the majority of Alawis are. And we're going to come later on to the fact that 60 years ago, one of their military members, Hafiz al-Assad, overthrew the government and took charge. And so he instituted the entire government to be from his own tribes and his own background. Currently, the Syrian regime is around 75% Alawi. The bureaucrats, the politicians, the generals, the military. So even though in the country, they're less than 10%. In the military and the politics, they're 75%. So understand this point. In the country, they're a minority. But in the ruling party, they are 3/4. They are the majority. They are the default. And they are the ruling family. And they used to have their headquarters in Latakia. Now their headquarters is in Damascus because of the ruling family over there. Why is it called Nusayris? It is called after its founder, and that is Muhammad ibn Nusayr. Muhammad ibn Nusayr. Now we have to go back 1,200 years. A little bit of Shia history over here. You're probably aware that the 12 Shia believe in 12 Imams. The 12th Imam is a hidden Imam for them, right? The 12th Imam for the 12 Shia is a hidden Imam. Now, the 11th Imam, Hassan al-Askari, had a disciple by the name of Muhammad ibn Nusayr. So Muhammad ibn Nusayr is a student of the 11th Imam, okay? And the 11th Imam died a very young age, in his 20s, and he was not married and he did not have kids according to Sunni historians. According to Shia historians, he had a secret milk yamin, a slave girl, and so he had a legitimate child, and that legitimate child was taken and hidden, in one of the caves of Iraq. So that is the 12th Imam, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Askari, the Ghaib Mahdi Imam. Sunni historians never believed this child existed. We don't believe it's a true story. He died a single man. He doesn't have children. That's our version of events. Now, the death of the 11th Imam is a big crisis in Shia history. Why? Because the Imam died and doesn't have a son. What's going to happen? So we believe, and I know that 12 Shias don't accept this, we believe the 12 Shias invented a hidden Imam. We don't agree with this. But how about the other Shia that don't believe in this? This is where Muhammad ibn Nusayr comes along. And Muhammad ibn Nusayr invents a new theology, a new ideology, which eventually becomes Nusayrism, right? So Muhammad ibn Nusayr began claiming that the 11th Imam is a manifestation of God, and he, Muhammad ibn Nusayr, is the bab or the door to the Imam. And so he begins preaching a new ideology. In fact, when Hassan al-Askari died, the Shia movement split into 15 firqas, 15 strands, because it was a crisis. When the Imam dies, one of those strands becomes 12er Shi'ism, another strand becomes Nusayrism. So here's a key point. Nusayrism and 12er Shi'ism, they go back to the same strand. Nusayrism is not a part of Ismailism. Nusayrism broke away from 12er Shi'ism, and it retained some of the original teachings of the Ghulat movement. So, long story short, Muhammad ibn Nusayr began preaching a message. One of his students, Abu Abdullah al-Husayn ibn Hamdan al-Khasibi, was one of the main architects of the theology. Al-Khasibi's grandson, Maymun ibn al-Qasim al-Tabarani. These three names are the main names you need to be aware of. Al-Khasibi and his grandson, al-Tabarani. They were the ones who fled to Syria and began preaching to a small group of Christians in Latakia. So it was these Christians who converted to their version of Islam, and those descendants are what we now call Nusayris. Okay? So it was Al-Khasibi and his grandson who fled because they were exiled by the state. They were not allowed to preach. So they fled to their regions far away, and they fled to these coastal towns, and they converted the non-Muslims there to their version of Islam. Generally speaking, people do not convert to a Nusayri theology. They're not active in preaching. And here's another key point. Nusayrism, like all of the Ghulats, Nusayrism does not teach its own followers their theology. Its own followers are not taught what it means to be a Nusayri. Rather, there's a hierarchy, and a few of the select elites, the khassa, a few of the elders are chosen by the elite to teach their theology to. The rest are left, they're called Amma Awam. The rest are left in darkness. And it is forbidden for a Nusayri to tell non-Nusayris about their beliefs. Their books are not printed. Their ideology is not public. They don't have seminaries. They don't have shuyukh that go study. It is simply handed down in their very elite circles. Not even the average Nusayri can tell you what they actually believe. Nusayrism has become a cult that the members are born into, and they don't even know what they believe. It's just a gang, really. And that explains a lot of what you see in that region, because in reality, they don't even know what they believe. And it's only been recent where non-Muslims who are intrigued, they've tried their best to uncover their books, they've tried their best to find their manuscripts, and modern, the Western Academy has actually done a great amount of research in what they actually believe. But the problem comes, what they believe is only amongst the khassatul khassa, they're elite. The average Nusayri is not capable, nor is he allowed to tell you what they actually believe. This is one of the ironic things of their faith. They're not even taught their faith. And they're told to just follow their traditions and elders. And the actual beliefs are not something that the average Nusayri would know. But we know this because plenty of research in the last 150 years has been done by non-Muslims. And here's an interesting story as well in this regard, that they are so secretive in this regard that by penalty of death, they will kill anybody who reveals their religion. And what happened was in the 1860s, 1863, a Nusayri converted to Christianity because the French came to Syria at that time. They began preaching Christianity. So a Nusayri by the name of Sulaiman al-Adani converted to Christianity. And he fled from his region. And he took some of the books. He was one of the elders, one of the khassa. He took some of the books and he wrote an exposition of the Nusayris. He exposed the Nusayris. And this book is called Al-Baqura Al-Sulaymaniya. Al-Baqura Al-Sulaymani. Actually, I have a copy of this and I approved this book. It's a difficult book to acquire, but it is available if you search for it. So it is called Al-Baqura Al-Sulaymaniya. This is in 1863. He wrote this book. And he describes his own experiences, his own beliefs. He describes his own rituals in which he participated in. And he was one of the first people 130 years ago to expose the reality of what Nusayris believe. And he mentioned that as a part of their salah, they drink wine. Their rituals, they drink wine, which is a Christian notion. They believe the blood of Hussein is in that wine, just like Christians believe the blood of Jesus. Literally, you see Christianity over here. As a part of their ibadah, they're drinking cups of wine. And he mentioned as well that they believe in the divinity of Ali and other things of this nature. The Nusayris convinced him to come back on some family issue and whatnot. They convinced him to come back. He came back to that land and they literally pounced on him, cut him up, burnt him alive to make an example that you don't dare expose our secrets to other people. It's a famous incident that took place where he was literally coaxed and tricked to come back and they executed him. Now, what is some of their beliefs? What are some of their beliefs? So we said already the name Nusayri goes back to Muhammad ibn Nusayr. What are some of their beliefs? I'm sorry, I'm going to really confuse you guys because the beliefs are not simple for us to understand. They are Gnostic, they are Manichaean, they are Zoroastrian, they are not Islamic. And you have notions of Christianity. So one of the things they believe, Trinity. They believe in a Trinity. They believe in three manifestations of God. And they call it Al-Ma'na, Al-Ism, and Al-Bab. Sorry to confuse you, this is the reality. Al-Ma'na, Al-Ism, and Al-Bab. And they believe Al-Ma'na is the original, Al-Ism is the manifestation, and Al-Bab is the door to get to both of them. And in this case, Al-Ma'na, which is the original, is, now listen to this carefully, is how Allah manifests Himself on earth. Allah shows Himself through the Ma'na. And the Ma'na chooses the Ism, and the Ism and the Ma'na both then have created the Bab. So the Ma'na and the Ism are both uncreated like the Father and the Son. The Ma'na and the Ism are somehow both divine. So there is this type of Trinity over here in this regard. And every generation has this type of Trinity. They believe in the repetition of history over and over again. So in the time of Adam and Seth and others were there. In the time of Yusha, in the time of Musa, in the time of Isa, and then in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Now we have the same Trinity here. And here is where it gets completely ghulat. The ma'na, according to them, is Ali, the original. The ism is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the bab is Salman al-Farisi. So it is as if the ma'na chose the ism. To be very simplistic, Ali radiallahu anh, according to them, is a manifestation of Allah. He chose the ism, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the both of them then created the bab, Salman al-Farisi. This is their trinity in this issue. Now, once again, the point being, simplistically, we say they're saying Ali is God. And perhaps that is the belief of many of the awam. But technically, and I'm trying to be technical because I don't believe in stereotyping, technically what they say is that the body of Ali has personified the reality of God on earth. They don't say, at least they're scholars, they don't say that Ali is walking God. They say Allah tajalla fi surati Ali, right? That Allah has manifested himself in the form of Ali radiallahu anhu, right? And one of them says, I'm sorry, this is all kufr here, but I have to teach you this. Naqiru kufr laysa bi kafir. I just remember this point, okay? I'm just teaching you what they say. And so they say, and because again, for the record, obviously, I'm not sectarian at all, and I try my best to bring all the groups, at least within Islam, but some groups we draw the line. So if I wasn't clear enough, obviously this group is outside the fold of Islam. There can be no two opinions about this, right? When you believe that Allah manifests himself in Surah Ali, you have left the fold of Islam. So there's no issue to say this, that these people are not within the fold of Islam, they're outside our kalima. But we need to know who they are. So they say that, and I quote from their books here, and again, I try to be very academic here. So they say, it is not him, meaning Allah is not Ali, but Allah is not other than Ali either. And in Arabic, la hiyahu wa la huwa ghayruhu. Okay? Again, this is their mystical interpretation, right? La hiya, yani surah Ali. La hiyahu, the surah of Ali is not God. And yet the surah of Ali is also not God. I.e., we don't affirm he's God, but we don't negate he's God either. Okay, this is their technical language that they say. And so God, Allah manifested himself 7 times on earth. The last of them was in Surah Ali, in the Surah of Ali. And therefore, Ali radiallahu anh created from his light Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is their version, right? From his light, from his nur, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam came. When I say created, it's again technical. I shouldn't say created because they will say fayadan. They will say that it just came through. That originally was Ali, and then Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes, and then from the both of them you have the Bab or Salman al-Farisi. And they also say then that Jesus Christ was the previous embodiment of God, just like Ali was this. So they have that special status of Ali radiallahu anh, and they have their own versions of the other prophets as well. They also believe that wine, as I said, khamr, it is a symbol of the death of Hussein. And so drinking wine in their rituals symbolizes that Hussein, radiallahu anh, has basically almost died for their sins, like Christians believe. That notion is there, like Christianity believes as well. They believe that, this is very, I'm sorry to say this, but I'm just teaching what they say. Just like Allah manifests himself in a trinity, so too Iblis manifests himself in a trinity in every one of these cycles. So Iblis also has 3. And so in the time of Musa, they say there was Fir'aun and Haman and Qarun. In the time of the Prophet astaghfirullah, but that's what they say, it was Umar, Abu Bakr and Uthman radiallahu anhu, right? And Umar is the main. Umar becomes the asl. They call him the Iblis wal Abalisa, like the biggest Iblis, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. And then Abu Bakr comes from him, and then Uthman. So this is their version of, and of course there's a lot of animosity towards them and towards those who respect them. They say that the salah, the zakah, the hajj, all of them are symbols of the various imams. So to offer the salah simply means to believe in Hussein. To go for hajj simply means to affirm one of the imams, and so on and so forth. So there is no actual salah or siyam or hajj or tilawah of the Quran. They don't have the Quran as a book that they recite, because every one of these rituals is interpreted to be symbolic. They also believe in the extreme practice of taqiyya and kitman, covering their beliefs. As I said, they're not allowed to preach their beliefs to other people. They believe in the transmigration of the soul, as I mentioned. They do not have masajid. There are no masajid amongst them. And their rituals are done in the homes of their teachers, of their shuyukh, they call them, right? The rituals are done in the homes of the elite, and only men participate in the rituals. Women do not have any teaching. Women do not have any rituals. Women have no idea of their beliefs. They are not, now this has led to the accusation that they think that women are not human or don't have souls. As far as I'm aware, I wasn't able to find this phrase, but for sure, they don't view women to be worthy of rituals and worthy of teaching. So women are excluded from all ceremonies, and women are excluded from all teaching. And as we said, only a small group amongst them, they're called the khassa, are taught their theology and become leaders. The bulk of them, 80-90%, they remain amma, juhal, they are not taught. And the durus are similar to this, by the way, they have a similar notion. Now, what is the stance of the 12 Shia with regards to the ghulat? Here we find an interesting point. For most of Islamic history, the 12 Shia considered the ghulat to be kuffar, or at least extreme heretics. And great Shi'i scholars, such as Al-Majlisi, Al-Baqir Al-Majlisi, such as Al-Tusi, these are classic icons of the 12 Imams. They said the Alawites or the Nusayris are outside the fold of Islam, or they are, Ahl al-Bid'ah, very, extreme people. We don't view them as being correct. However, in the last 50 years, this has now changed. And there is a reconciliation, there is a rapprochement between many of the modern ayatullahs, many of the modern clerics, and between the Nusayris. And so the famous Lebanese cleric Musa al-Sadr, Musa al-Sadr gave a fatwa in which he said that the Nusayris are one of the firaq of the 12ers. They're one of us. One of the firaq, just the one under the madhab amongst us, right? And this is completely contradicting what the classical 12er Imams said, such as Tusi and such as Al-Baqir Al-Majlisi and others. So we now have a rapprochement happening, and the analysis is that Hafiz al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad, made a point to try to bring reconciliation between the Nusayris and between the 12ers for the first time in their history. Otherwise, this had never happened. And Hafiz al-Assad wanted to become more mainstream, so he tried to get some type of taqarub between 12ers and between Nusayris, and that seems to have worked because we now see that some type of alliance is taking place. However, historically, this has not been the case. Now, to summarize some aspects of history, then maybe inshallah we'll continue another day, but I don't want to go too long here. Historically, this movement has never preached outside of itself. This movement did not welcome converts. This movement has been isolated, as we said, in one province in Bilad al-Sham, in Syria, and throughout all of Islamic history, they remained in this one province by and large, and they were considered to be a nuisance to everybody else. They were bandits, thugs, highway robbers. They were not given positions of power and influence. They were isolated, and every visitor that visited them, and you had plenty of visitors. Ibn Battuta went and heard about them. Even in modern times, you had non-Muslims travel through Syria in the 18th, 19th century, and they describe the Nusayris as being violent, vicious, backward, uneducated. Everybody despises them because they're just causing nuisance to everybody, destroying livestock, raiding into the villages. So nobody used to like them throughout all of history. In fact, when the Crusaders came, the Crusaders thought they were Muslims for a while, so they were also being persecuted by the Crusaders. When the Crusaders realized that these are not Muslims, they actually invited them into their armies. And a number of them became a part of the Crusader army against the Muslims. This shows you that distinction that existed. And in the time of the Mamluks, the Mamluks attempted to convert them to Sunnism. They sent preachers, they built masjids in that region, but it had no impact whatsoever. In fact, it is said that they took the masjid, the Mamluks built masjids in their cities. They used the masjids to house their sheep and their livestock. The masjids became places where they would house their sheep and their livestock. And if a wanderer wandered through and he saw a masjid and he would give the adhan, they would make fun of this person. What are you doing here? What is this weird noise that you're saying? They had no clue what the adhan was. And therefore, our scholars, Abdul Qahir al-Baghdadi, he said this group is outside the fold of Islam. He's writing 1,000 years ago, because this group has nothing to do with Islam, because they make Ali radiallahu anhu into a divine manifestation. Ibn Taymiyyah was asked about what is the verdict of the Nusayris. And Ibn Taymiyyah said, the Nusayris, famously remarked, أكثر من اليهود والنصارى. They have more blasphemy than even Jews and Christians. Jews and Christians are more rightly guided than these people, he's saying. Like, they have such deviant beliefs. And he said they cannot be considered Muslim. You cannot marry them. You cannot eat their dhabiha. They have nothing. They don't pray. So Ibn Taymiyyah actually was, fairly well aware for the people of his time, even though he didn't have access to their books. Yet he described in somewhat accuracy, and he considered them to be outside the fold of Islam, and he said they are a bigger threat to the Ummah than the Mongol invasion. This is Ibn Taymiyyah's famous fatwa. He said they are a bigger threat to us than the Mongols who are invading us. This is a group that is a worse animosity to us. To make a long story short, what happened in the last 60, 70 years? When the French came, and it's always the colonizers, when the French came and they colonized this region, they wanted to find a group that they could use against the Sunni majority. And so they began rallying to the Nusayris. And they did the same to the Duruz, by the way. The Duruz is another group, maybe we'll talk about them another day. So the Nusayris, they began educating them and they began conscripting them into the army. The French, they began giving them elite military training, elite weapons that they didn't give to the Sunnis, because they knew that the Nusayris hated the Sunnis. And they knew the Nusayris could be used against the Sunnis even though they're a minority. And so the French transformed this group to become a militia, to become a well-equipped training militia. Thus, when World War II finished, who had the weapons, who had the training, who had the army, it was the Nusayris. Long story short, they were the ones who then overthrew the ruling parties, and one amongst them, a young lieutenant by the name of Hafiz al-Assad, he was a part of the overthrowing group in the 60s, and then he did a coup amongst his own group, and he overthrew his own friends in 1970, and in 1970 he declared himself to be the leader and the president, and this was a shock because they're a minority, and they were a despised minority. But in 1970 he declared himself to be the ruler of Syria, and he was a very brutal, all the Syrians know this, all the people know this, he was a very brutal dictator, did not allow any type of dissent, a very secret military police force, and in his reign, his group, the Nusayris, were given the dominance in the land, and then of course his son has taken over, as you're aware, and now we have this reality going on here. So to conclude, the Nusayris are the most extremist Shiite interpretation in all of human history. There's nothing beyond them. They are the most extreme. And I don't like to say this, but there's no way to say this. Really, the fact of the matter, we have to draw lines. And this group is outside those lines. There's just no way else to say this, right? Even if we don't want to preach violence, that's a separate thing altogether. We have to speak factually. Once you say that God manifests himself in a human being, khalas, there is no kalima. There is no, once you have no salah, no zakah, no hajj, no Quran, what do you have left, right? So yes, we have to draw lines, as I said multiple times. And so this group is beyond those lines. And even if we consider them outside the fold, had they remained in their province and done what they've done, we would not want to hurt them, and they don't want to hurt us. But unfortunately, what has happened is this movement has been violent. This group has been tyrannical. This group has destroyed its own country. And so what has happened is happened, and that's a political analysis beyond the scope. My goal today was to explain to you who this group are and what they believe. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the brothers and sisters that we have in Syria, our Sunni brethren there. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow tyranny to be overthrown, to justice to prevail, and to protect all the innocent lives of that region. Jazakumullahu khair.